Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. The historical blueprint of a great Argead saga, ALEXEIN. Volume 1, Telesias, The War Dance. By Makāula Nakae. Audio essay. Episode 13, Achilles, Legends of the Ultimate Vanguard. Welcome back to Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. I am Makāula Nakae. To truly map the psychological landscape of Queen Olympias and her world-conquering son, Alexander III, we must look backward to the absolute fountainhead of their ancestral pride. In our previous episode, we unraveled the Heraclean calculus that defined King Philip's royal legitimacy. Today, we step into the blinding, volatile glare of the ultimate epic archetype, Achilles. For the Molossian house of Epirus, the royal family that bore Queen Olympias, Achilles was not a distant character in a scroll. He was their direct biological ancestor through his son, Neoptolemus. His code of absolute honor, his supreme physical speed, and his consuming, world-shattering rage were the exact genetic blueprints, inherited by Olympias and passed directly into the soul of Alexander. To understand the private fire that drove the vanguard of the Argead saga, we must first decode the raw mythology of the mightiest warrior of Troy. The biological duality, divine blood, and the vulnerable heel. The chronicle of Achilles begins at the precise, volatile intersection of the mortal and immortal realms. He was born to Thetis, a powerful Nereid sea nymph, and Peleus, a mortal king of Phthia. This unique parentage was never a simple genealogical detail. It engineered the fundamental tragic duality of his entire character. Through his mother, Achilles inherited near-superhuman physical traits. Unmatched speed on the battlefield, relentless stamina, and a blinding grace in line combat. Through his father, however, he was permanently bound to the unyielding laws of human mortality. Historical accuracy requires a fascinating source-critical clarification here. The famous narrative of Thetis dipping her infant son into the dark waters of the river Styx to grant him invulnerability, holding him by the heel and leaving that single coordinate exposed, is actually a much later classical addition to the mythos. It does not appear anywhere within the original text of Homer's Iliad. Yet, whether we analyze the original Homeric songs or the later Roman legends, the symbolic message remains identical. Even the most magnificent, divinely touched human machine is ultimately subject to fate, vulnerability, and certain death. The Chiron Forge, a multifaceted education. Mainstream media frequently misrepresents Achilles as a mindless, muscle-bound berserker. The deeper mythological record completely refutes this simplification. Achilles' formative youth was spent in exile on Mount Pelion, where he was raised and rigorously trained by the centaur Chiron. Chiron did not merely instruct the young prince in the mechanics of slaughter, weapon handling, and battlefield tactical movement. He deeply educated him in the fine arts of classical music, stringed instruments, and advanced botanical medicine. This ancient educational model represents the absolute ideal of the balanced, multifaceted Hellenic hero. It proved that true martial preeminence must be balanced by deep intellectual and artistic sensitivity. This is the exact educational template that Olympias later demanded for her own son at Mysa. It explains why Alexander the Great could pivot seamlessly from ruthlessly anchoring a heavy cavalry charge to passionately debating philosophy and treating the battlefield wounds of his companions with his own hands. The wrath of the vanguard, honor over empire. The central architectural spine of Homer's Iliad is explicitly summarized in its very first line. It is an epic song dedicated entirely to the menace, the destructive cataclysmic wrath of Achilles. During the grueling 10-year siege of Troy, Achilles operated as the supreme shock weapon of the Achaean coalition. However, when the High King Agamemnon publicly violated his martial honor by stripping away his prize, the Princess Briseis, Achilles did not comply. He executed a radical, total strike, completely withdrawing himself, his elite Myrmidon troops, and his massive fleet from the line of battle. His refusal to fight highlights the absolute supremacy of individual agency and personal honor over imperial collective survival. Achilles watched with cold, detached indifference as the Trojan forces under Hector systematically breached the Greek camp and began burning their longships. He demonstrated that to a true child of the demigods, an alliance founded on dishonor is entirely worthless. It was only the catastrophic battlefield slaughter of his absolute soulmate and companion, Patroclus, that violently broke his isolation. Consumed by an unbearable, explosive grief that transcended the physical world, Achilles drew his divine armor back on, single-handedly slaughtered the Trojan Vanguard, executed Hector, and dragged his corpse behind his chariot wheels. His destiny was eventually fulfilled when a targeted arrow unleashed by Epirus, and guided directly by the hidden hand of Apollo, pierced his vulnerable heel before the Scaean gates, delivering a tragic, spectacular conclusion to a life defined by pure intensity. The Epirot inheritance, the bloodline of Neoptolemus. The profound legacy of Achilles did not burn out on the blood-soaked plains of Troy. It was carried forward across the centuries through his solitary son, Neoptolemus, also known as Epirus. Born on the island of Skyros, Neoptolemus was summoned to the front line of the war following his father's death, as seers prophesied that the high walls of Troy would never fall without the biological seed of Achilles present. Neoptolemus executed his father's legacy with a terrifying, uncompromised ferocity. He was the frontline warrior who brutally slaughtered the old King Priam upon his own sacred altar and masterminded the definitive sack of the city. Following the collapse of Troy, Neoptolemus marched his veteran forces northwest, permanently settling the rugged mountain terrain of Epirus and establishing the autocratic ruling dynasty of the Aeacidi. This is the exact royal house that engineered Queen Olympias. For her, the wrath of Achilles, the tactical ferocity of Neoptolemus, and the terrifying ripple effects of the Trojan War were active family realities. She raised Alexander to believe that he was the living reincarnation of this heroic ideal, an ideological fire that burned so deeply that Alexander famously slept with a dagger and a copy of the Iliad, annotated by Aristotle, beneath his pillow throughout his entire campaign in Asia. Reclaiming the mythic scars? In ALEXEIN, we do not treat the legend of Achilles as an isolated piece of ancient folklore. We understand it as the foundational psychological mirror for our characters. The ancient Greeks recognized that the line between human vulnerability and divine power is exceptionally blurry. Achilles represents the tragic beauty of a life lived with absolute unfiltered passion, a soul that intentionally chose a short, blindingly glorious existence over a long-forgotten life of comfort. By mapping his mythic traits onto the real-world statecraft of Olympias and Alexander, we strip away the sanitized modern distortions of their history. We step directly into the raw, unyielding reality of a bloodline that refused to be managed by lesser men, executing their destiny in the vanguard of antiquity exactly as their ancestors did before the walls of Troy. Tune in for our next daily drop tomorrow as we continue to dissect the bloodlines of antiquity. ALEXEIN, a great Argead saga. Volume 1, Telesias, the War Dance. Unearth the ultimate historical drama. We are releasing a brand new episode every single day until the epic conclusion of Volume 1. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused, 5 to 15-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, the perfect daily plunge into the ancient world. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Telesias playlist. Subscribe to follow the rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our Vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below. Did Alexander's deep, lifelong obsession with duplicating the mythic path of Achilles inspire his strategic genius, or did it ultimately trap his psychology in a destructive, unyielding loop of pride and emotional volatility? Let me know your breakdowns in the comments below.